back to another edition of History in Your Own Backyard. Today we're in Clermont County, right here in Goshen Township. We'll be talking with Mr. Jim Poe about the Cook Cabin. Jim, thank you so much for talking with us today.
Hey, it's great to be out. Beautiful morning.
It is a beautiful morning. So tell us about this cabin.
Long story. The cabin proper was constructed in approximately 1803. And it was on the other side of the creek. We had heard that for years and didn't believe it, just was one of the local rumors. And then when the restoration guys came in and started taking it down, they said, believe it or not, this is not the original side of the cabin. It was moved to this side. Tradition said it was moved over here because the Cooks kept getting flooded out by the abandoned creek and couldn't get to town. But we think what we found over the years is they probably moved it because there's a spring right behind it, and that they had a spring house, and that gave them the access to the cool water and that type of thing. But it was a long restoration, an expensive restoration, but it is absolutely one of the jewels of our school district and of the township right now.
Now, can you tell me about some of the unique aspects that are actually inside of the cabin? You had mentioned to us some information about the stairwell and about the windows and the doors. Right. Can you tell us about that?
Right. First off, one of the first things we found out was these cabins were actually called log houses or log homes, and they were professionally built. The farmer, the new guy in town, didn't just come in and chop down trees and build them. He didn't know any more about building log cabins than you and I did. So they were professionally built, and usually by Germans that were coming through the area. The restoration people could tell what group of Germans built them by the notches. They all seemed to use a different type notch. The other amazing thing that we learned was the logs were never exposed. They were covered immediately, and that's why we still have some of them. If you had money, you got shiplap. If you didn't have so much money, you got board and batten. But they were covered and on the outside. The inside was immediately whitewashed. Mama wanted it whitewashed so it was clean and bright inside. Inside the cabin, when we started restoration, the doors were not in the proper position. Our restoration people said this is not correct. The stairs were not correct. And as we gutted the inside of the cabin, well, the doors were going to be correct because they had moved them, and all we did was just adjust them back. The staircase had been totally moved to a different section of the cabin, and so it was put back on the wall where it's supposed to be. And one of the interesting parts of the staircase was the one we have now was donated by John Ruthven, the artist, the wildlife artist. He had one in the barn, and he'd done some restoration work in Georgetown, and he gave us that staircase. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Very cool. And can you tell us a little bit about the woman that the cabin is named after?
Really a cook, a classic in Goshen Township, just a magnificent educator woman, never married. She moved into the cabin proper, of which really people didn't know it was a cabin. It was so encapsulated at that time. As a youth, probably about 13 years old, word had it that there was some illness in the family, and Aurelia, they brought her down to live with two aunts, two spinster aunts that lived in the cabin. She came down here to stay with them and never left, and died in the cabin proper. I'm thinking about 1995, in the mid-90s somewhere. And she passed away in the cabin. The school district ended up buying the property, the farm, over the years, and the Historical Society took on the task of restoring the cabin.
Now tell me a little bit about some of the other structures that we see around the cabin.
Okay, we have the Cooks were big into poultry from what we understand. So we have a brooder house, which is and most of our structures are really somewhat bad shape, but they are in the restoration process. But a brooder house that they kept the chicks in. It's got a very low roof to keep the heat down on the chicks. There is a carriage house. One of the newer structures is probably a 1950s, what we would call mid-century pole barn, and a corn crib, about that same era. There's a poultry house, a huge poultry house in the rear, and another star attraction is the bank barn. And our restoration people told us at that time, we know you want to save the cabin, but you have to save that barn because all the stone is what they call dry laid in that. There's no mortar. And it's built about 1920, and it's standing perfectly, and that has been restored.
And you were also telling us about the chimney and the stone that went into building the chimney?
Amazing. When we got the cabin, there was an old fireplace that had been put on in about the 50s, and it looked 1950s for sure. So we had it taken down and decided to put a full-size stone fireplace in, cooking type fireplace. And there was an old German fellow by the name of Walter, and his last name escapes me, but he was 80 years old, and Walter did the whole chimney by himself, and took him not quite a year, but probably 9 or 10 months, and he laid the chimney himself. He did have some help getting stone up on the scaffold and mixing the mortar and that type of thing, but Walter laid every stone himself. He was a German stonemason, came from Germany, and just magnificent the work he did.
And some of those stones weigh up to or over 100
Oh, they have
pounds.
to be. Some of them have to be over 100 pounds. And some of the stone we purchased, and some of the stone was brought in from White Oak Creek over in Brown County. One of our members donated that stone.
And what is the cabin used for today?
Today, it's strictly an educational tool. The kids use it. The third grade does a cabin tour every year. The first grade does a Thanksgiving type thing where we actually have ladies that we sent to Malabar Farm several years ago to learn to cook on an open fire over a fireplace, and they cook over the fireplace and churn butter and this type of thing. But it's basically education. It's not uncommon to come up to the cabin and see a high school class sitting on the floor doing their studying and complaining because it's cold, it's dark, and so on.
Just like it was when it was originally built, right?
Back in the old Corps when it was tough, yeah.
Thanks again so much for watching today's edition of History in Your Own Backyard. Today we spent time in Goshen Township, right here in Clermont County, Ohio, learning all about the Cook Cabin. We certainly hope that you enjoyed learning all about it. Remember, travel slowly and stop often. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.